Hello and welcome to the channel. I wanted to take a little bit of your time today and just kind of expound or talk about the things that have been going on around here this past year, things that are going on in our country, maybe even show you a little bit of bushcraft today. But as I was thinking back on the year, and since the start of this channel, that our world has been in a great turmoil lately. All sorts of protests and riots and things that just really will get you down. But as I think back about this past year, I wonder, has things really changed so much in our country that we have to be this radical, that our government has to be radical and impose their will, their elitist will on our society? And do they have anything to do with what's going on in your personal life? And for me, it's just been one thing after another, but more than that, I just do not let these things bother me. Because it says in Ecclesiastes, everything is still the same as it always has been. There's a season for everything. And so we look at this world and we look back on history and we see that the Greeks went through this same turmoil, the Romans went through this turmoil, and other great civilizations did too, and either conquered by other countries or destroyed by other countries. We've had peoples destroyed by other peoples for no apparent reason, and other than power. People want power. They want power over your life. They want power over what you do. And you are the one that has control over what you do and the power that you let others have over you. And you have to stand up against that sometimes. We had a riot that happened in the nation's capital at the beginning of this presidential cycle, and they called it an insurrection. I don't think it was an insurrection at all. I think really what it was just a bunch of people who just got out of hand. They or revelers more than anything else. I mean, look at that nut that wore the Viking hat and all that, the shaman. The guy was a complete nut as far as I'm concerned. But this world has just changed dramatically since I grew up. You know, when I was younger, I lived out in the middle of the wood like I do now, and just enjoyed life. I went where I wanted or did what I wanted when I wanted without having to worry about somebody out there, some fool hurting you or harming you. You can't do that. You can't let your children run out today on their own. It's just, I mean, even when they're up into their teens, their late teens, you can't let them go out on their own. This world has a lot of evil in it, and you have a lot of evil people looking to hurt you. So, watch your children. But I wanted to take a little bit of this time today and talk about how things were when I grew up. I told you that we were able to go where we wanted and do what we wanted when we wanted. I rode my bicycle all over Lauderdale County. I went fishing in different parts of the state, riding my bicycle there. I can't do it today, obviously. But I live out in the middle of the wood, and I have a 5-acre lake. I live so much into the wood that I can go deer hunting if I want. I can supplement my rations that I have at the house with deer meat. I've got a garden that I always plant every year. In fact, it's getting about time to get ready for that garden this year to plant. But I always plant enough vegetables to last us through the year. We have peas and corn and tomatoes and okra and squash and cucumbers, and we have blueberry bushes that we use to make jams and jellies and cobblers and add to our cereals, our oatmeal and raisin bran, our bran cereal. But we're pretty much self-sufficient out here. If the power were to go off down here, I could manage. I have generators, I have solar power. We'll talk about solar power in another video because I'm getting ready to put solar power in a shed that I have that I purchased at an estate sale for $800. It cost me $500 to move it down here. So I've got a 10 by 16 tough shed that if I had to buy it new would cost about $6,000, and I got it for $800. $13 if you want to count the shipping. getting it down here. But as I was growing up, I did all kind of things. In junior high school, I ran track and played baseball, played football and basketball, lettered in all of those sports when I was younger. Then in high school, I got to where I was I wasn't tall anymore. I was a little bit shorter than everybody else, so I dropped basketball. And it started off as being a split end in football. And because the coach had put us on a weight program, I gained a lot of weight. Not a lot of weight, but I gained more weight than I was. I was all spindly and wiry. But I gained enough weight that he moved me from split end to center. I was a good center. I could block well and do what I should do as a center, protect the quarterback. Speaking of the quarterback, we were not the best team in the world. We had a perfect record. We lost every game. That's a good story there, but one little interlude here is the quarterback of our team. We were in Tupelo playing that high school up there, and things just weren't going our way as usual. But the quarterback, I came back to the huddle, and the quarterback said, "You're not snapping the ball right to me, and you're not blocking right. You've got to do this, and you've got to do that." And I said, "You think I'm not doing right?" He said, "I know you are. You're just not doing what you're supposed to do." I said, "Okay, the next one's going to be just what you need." I snapped the ball to him, and the middle linebacker was coming in. I stepped out of the way, and he nailed the quarterback. Went back to the huddle. I said, "Well, how was that? Did that meet your expectations?" I thought that was amusing. But anyway, as time went on, life in our country at that time in the late 60s, we had all kind of protests going on about the Vietnam War. And I was watching friends of mine who graduated high school and were drafted and went off to war come back in body bags. I watched soldiers coming back home and being mistreated by the public. It was not a popular war, as no war is in reality, but I was facing an uncertain future. Here I was, 17 years old, getting ready to graduate from high school. And the next year, when my birthday came around, the draft came into being. It was a lottery back then. There was no going to Canada. I didn't know anybody in Canada. I didn't want to go to jail or anything like that, but it just kind of scared me. So I decided that I would enlist in the United States Army. So in 1970, in July, I enlisted, and I went off to basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky. And there in Fort Knox, Kentucky, I got a good education in life. Met some people. I think I was one of 5 people from Mississippi in our company of about 400. Everybody else was like from New York, Michigan, and Illinois, and Indiana, and places like that. So I was naturally out of place. And guess what the platoon sergeant did? Guess what the drill sergeant did? He made me a squad leader. Here I am, a boy from Mississippi, a squad leader over a platoon mainly from New York. And I was in a kind of a minority there, but had a lot of trouble with that. Had people corner me in the bathroom one night in the latrine and told me I was just making things hard for them, that I was putting them on fire guard too often. Well, I rotated fire guard. Everybody did fire guard, including me. And when it came your turn, you had to do it. But they didn't like it, and they had me cornered in there and told me what they were going to do to me. And it scared me so much I didn't know what to do. I like to mess my drawers. But I had the presence of mind to say, okay, which one of you is going to die? Well, I managed to talk my way out of that and get out of it without any troubles. When you get in a situation where you're going to have to defend yourself, you're gonna do things that you don't normally do. You're going to do all kind of superhuman things or super crazy things, one or the other. I don't think there's much difference between the two. But to make the long story short there, when I got into the Army, I knew I was headed to Vietnam. And I said if I had to go, I wanted to be prepared. So From basic training, I went to AIT, where I learned to be a radio operator, learning Morse code. Nobody knows Morse code anymore. Nobody uses Morse code. But it's a good way to communicate with one another. If you know Morse code, you can encrypt you a letter and put it in Morse code, and nobody knows what you said. All they know is there's a bunch of dots and dashes there, and they don't know how to read it. But anyway, I became a pretty good operator. From there, I got up to what's called 18 groups per minute in sending and receiving. That was pretty fast back then. But I decided after AIT that, I still wasn't ready to go to Vietnam. I wasn't prepared. Basic training, AIT, don't prepare you for combat. I don't care what anybody says. So from there, I enlisted, or I volunteered for the United States Army Airborne course. And I went off to Airborne at Fort Benning, Georgia, and they trained me to jump out of airplanes. And that was a 3-week course, probably the worst bit of physical training I had ever been involved in. We never stopped running. When you went through the chow line, you ate while you were running in place. And you had to finish that meal before you got to the end of the line, so that you'd start at one end and you'd get your whatevers or whatever and get to the end and get your time. You get to the end of that line, you better be through, because there's a garbage can there. There's a garbage can there to throw your food in. Whether you threw or not, you were done. You dumped your plate and your tray and put it in the wash water and moved on out. And we're headed to push-ups. And most people, about 20 minutes later, with all the running that was involved in that, would lose their lunch, so that you wind up with an empty stomach again. And this went on for about 10 hours a day in all the training that you had to do. You had you were training in parachute landing falls. You were training in a suspended harness. We called it suspended agony. If you look that up online somewhere, you'll know what suspended agony is. We learned to handle a parachute from a 250-foot tower. That 250-foot tower was a ride at the World's Fair in the early 20th century. And when the United States Army decided they were introducing airborne before World War II into the ranks, they moved or bought those towers. There's 3 of them. They bought those towers and moved them down to Fort Benning, Georgia. And at Fort Benning, Georgia, that's what they'd do. They'd hoist you up on that thing and turn you loose and let you glide back down on an old T-10 parachute. The old T-10 parachute was not maneuverable, not steerable. To some degree, you could if you climbed the risers and would dump some air out, but it's kind of a dangerous thing. You can wind up dumping too much air out. But everybody that went through basic airborne training, quite a few of them drifted into the tower and had to be rescued from that. That was another thing there. Well, while I was in airborne, when I graduated from that, I was invited to try out for the Rangers. And so I accepted the offer and tried out. Made it through Rangers and got that tab for my uniform. And that was quite an experience. I thought it was terrible. I thought they were going to kill me there. It was 10 times worse than airborne training, the things you had to do. But more than anything else, learning to be a Ranger, you learned how to work with other people. You learned how to depend on other people to take care of you and you to take care of them. Well, I enjoyed the Ranger School, but I still wasn't through. I got invited to try out for the Special Forces, United States Army Green Berets. And if nothing else, the Green Berets taught me to be prepared for what was coming up. And I really enjoyed that. Special Forces Basic was an 8-week course where they took you out into the forest, and you spent that time out there in the woods with one pair of clothes, one pair of boots. You talk about some nasty folks. We got that way. But we trained in guerrilla warfare then. We trained in unconventional warfare. And in that, we learned to train other people how to use firearms and how to conduct raids and attacks and ambushes and things that were necessary to be a Green Beret. It taught you hand-to-hand combat. This was not karate. This was nothing like judo. This was nothing like jiu-jitsu. This was combat karate. And combat karate's main purpose is to kill. And that's the whole purpose of the Army, is to kill people and break things. Be realistic about it. But the Special Forces was a good part of my life in that time. Here I was 20, 21 years old. I stayed in the Army from 1970 to 1980. But it was a good part of my life, and it was also a sad part of my life. I remember coming home to see my family one Christmas, and I'm wearing my uniform, because you couldn't fly without your uniform on. And I wore my uniform on. You've heard tales of people spitting on soldiers, of people cursing soldiers. Well, that's the truth. You ask any old timer who has spent any time in Vietnam and spent any time in a uniform, and they'll tell you the same thing. It's true. Weren't like today. I really applaud these youngsters that are going off and deciding to defend our freedoms and do what they're doing. And I'll do everything I can to support them. If you see one in public, buy his lunch, buy his or her lunch. They've earned it, so support them. But after the Army, I came home and I was looking for something to do, and I bummed around on several things, but I wound up being a truck driver. So from 1980 until a few years back, I drove a truck, and I drove all over this country, all over the 49 states and Canada. And there's not much of any place I haven't been. I've never driven to Hawaii, of course, a little wet, but you know, truck drivers back when I was learning to drive, when I was first starting to drive a big truck, were a different breed than they are now. They'd help you. They'd do anything they could for you. It's not that way now. The people that are graduating truck driver academy, I grew up in trucking. My grandfather was a trucker, my daddy was a trucker, and so I just kind of fell in the same niche there. But the truck drivers today, they'll spend 2 weeks learning how to drive a truck. Now the trucks I drove were what they call a 4x4, 16 speed, 2 stick shifts, with 4 gears each that you had to run through. You'd put it in first and go through 4 gears, second and go through 4 gears, third and go through 4 gears, and fourth and go through 4 gears until you topped out there. But nowadays they have an automatic transmission, and they barely know how to do that. I ran across a young lady who was driving a truck at Dollar General store, and she couldn't even back up the truck. Didn't know how to back the truck up. She told me all that she ever did was go forward. What's the matter with these truck driving academies? That they can't teach the basics. Backing a truck is not that difficult. Of course, it's a 50-foot trailer nowadays. It might be a little long, but I think that's okay. Try backing a set of pups up 2 trailers. You think it can't be done? It can be. I did it. Did it several times. But, you know, I drove 7 million miles with no accidents. I made it through that, finished up with a company hauling high volt oil for transformers all over the country, and asphalt and black oil for newspaper companies up in New York. I don't know if they use it anymore or not. I think it's all digital now. But I finished up with that company and retired to where I am down here, but back to driving that truck deal. Probably the most learning experiences I had about society and what it was like. As I was saying about the truck drivers today, I was just before I retired, there was a truck that passed me, blew my doors off, and he was, I don't know, he was running about 80 miles an hour, but you know, there was a car in front of him, and he was like 5 feet from that bumper, running about 80 miles an hour, trying his best to push that car on down the road. You may have seen that kind of thing out in public, I don't know, but it's just not fun. And anyway, I got on my CB radio and I chastised him up one side and down the other, and he got to calling me all kind of names. He wouldn't stop for me. I was ready for him to stop, but he wouldn't do it. But he called me all kind of names, and I said, just before I finished up with him, I said, what if that were your family? Would you want me running 80 miles an hour, 5 feet off of their bumper going down the road? No, you wouldn't. That family's husband wouldn't want you, or father wouldn't want you doing that either. So I don't know, it's just not the same as it was when I was learning. But as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I wanted to show you a little bit of bushcraft and some of the things I learned when I was in the Army. We had World War II K rations when I first went in that we trained with, and a little bit later on we had C rations. And if you've ever seen a box of C rations, you know they're coming in cans. The meats and the vegetables and everything that you have, the soups, are all in cans. So I wanted to show you a little bit about that today and how to work with the cans that are left over in the woods by yourself. And I was going to make a cup of coffee today. C rations came with all sorts of food. They came with bread, they came with fruit, they came with the vegetables, they came with the meat. They had the mystery meat in there. You didn't know what it was, but there was always something else. They had ham and beans. There was another name for it, but you'll have to look that up yourself. Ham and beans. Not everybody wanted ham and beans. Scrambled eggs. You had a can of eggs, and generally when you open those eggs up, they were green. This was a can of artichokes that I had that I opened up and threw them away since they were expired. And I cut the lid completely out of that so that there is no top on this. But I'll show you what we'll do with this can right here. With this can, we're going to use this as our top. This is our bottom. And what we'll do, don't try this at home. I'm a professional accident waiting to happen. But what we're going to do is we're going to take this can and we're going to slice it like this. Cut it across one way there. Then we're going to cut it across another way. And we're going to cut it this way. And we'll cut it this way. And in case you're wondering what we're doing, we're making an improvised stove. This being our drinking cup and this being our stove. So we're going to take these little parts that we just cut, and we're going to open this up. Be real careful with this, because if you've ever dealt with tin, you'll know it's sharp. A tin can cut you 3 ways, deep, wide, and often. And generally it's a shallow cut though, not a deep cut. And there ain't nothing worse than a paper cut and a tin can cut. So what we've done is we've taken this tin can here and we've made a top to it, a chimney, so that our drinking can will sit up here like this. This drinking can will hold most. I heard a shot, but this drinking can will hold our water that we use to make our coffee with, and it'll just sit there like that. Now, once you have that tin can set up, it's time to cut it again. You need to make a place to load your fire material. So we're going to cut a sort of an H here, 2 lines, 1 down each side there. Then we're going to cut that like this. And that's the way this will look. You'll have a little spot here that you'll push out and you'll open it up like that. So what you have now is a place to load your fire making material, a place to set your can, and your drinking can. These are things that were done in the Army when you didn't have what you were supposed to. I wasn't going to use any of my old canteen cups or anything like that. They're prized possessions nowadays, but I'll show you this. With this can here, it just sets on the top. Don't try this. I'm a professional accident waiting to happen. So that's that. Now you need to gather some twigs and things like that in order to make your fire. Have something for your fire to set on so that you won't burn your place or burn your house down if you're doing this inside. Well, what we'll do now is take our can and fill it up with a little bit of water, like that, just a little bit, about 2/3 of a can. It'll set up top, and it'll set by like that. There, it sits nicely. But to begin with, you have the things that come in MREs nowadays that come in a package like this. You can open that up and get everything ready. And inside this package, some of the necessities of life: toilet paper, chewing gum for those that have bad breath when they need it, a moist towelette to wash up with, sugar, salt, a non-dairy creamer, a 25-year-old dried bottle of Tabasco sauce. We'll just want to toss that away. Oh, I'm in the wood. Don't toss it in the woods. Taster's Choice coffee, and matches to light your fire with. Those are the things that come in an accessory package in MREs. So I'm going to take just a second here, and I'm going to go find a piece of wood. What I have here in these little shavings, this is called fat. Fat pine occurs naturally in the woods from trees that have been cut down, pine trees in particular, and the sap in it stays in that stump and becomes fat, so that it becomes full of turpentine. And with that, you can use that to start your fire. But I have a stick here that I whittle some shavings off. We're going to take those shavings and we're going to put them in our container. Put our fat pine in. Take our 25-year-old matches from Hurricane Katrina. More shots going off. Now you'll wait a few minutes while this fire builds up and turns into some coals and gets hot. One of the things the troops, the soldiers in the Vietnam era had out of their sea rations in order to warm them up was trioxane. Trioxane, they'd put in a can like this to heat up, but trioxane was a toxic type thing. If you let it or inhaled it like this, if it had that fumes coming up like that smoke, it would give you a terrible headache. And so you had to make sure the wind was blowing in the right direction to use that. Well, most of the troops that had any experience at all in woodsmanship used this method here of warming their food up and making their fires. Just like your fireplace, you could even warm your hands up. Nice cup of hot water. We have our world famous Hurricane Katrina rations. We'll dump that inside there. And we'll let it steep for a little bit. Get our nature swizzle stick and stir it up good. And if you don't like black coffee, you can put in a thing of sugar. It's Stir it up again. And on a cold day, you got a nice hot cup of beverage. It may not be to your taste, but it's not necessarily bad either. Not necessarily good. But there you have it. That's a Bushcraft camp stove that you can make yourself out of 2 tin cans of your survival rations that you have left over. So give it a shot. Try it yourself. Be careful. Don't cut yourself.